Today is July 8th, 2011, and I'm Lester Sharlach. My videographer is Marcy Schoenfeld, and on behalf of the Jewish Historical Society of Lower Fairfield County, we have the pleasure of interviewing Eleanor Guss at our archives on Hope Street. Good afternoon, Eleanor.
Good afternoon, Lester.
Marcy.
Marcy.
Pleasure to see you again today. Tell me, Eleanor, were your parents born in the United States?
My father was born in New York. My mother was born in Russia and emigrated to Canada when she was 6 years old.
Mm-hmm. And you have your mother maiden name?
My mother was Rose Rosenfield, and she
Mm-hmm.
grew up in Cornwall, Ontario, Canada. Her father was the rabbi in Cornwall. She had 6 brothers and sisters, and still very close to my mother's family.
And you say your mother was born in Lithuania?
Lithuania, yes.
Yeah.
Yes, in Grodno Gubernia,
Mhm.
in a town called Breza.
And where did she live after settling in Canada? Did she spend her life there?
My mother lived in Cornwall
Mhm.
and went to college in Kingston, Ontario. She went to Queens and just got a 2-year degree, whatever. It was 1 year, 1 extra year of high school in Cornwall, and a year at Queens was enough to teach. In those days, it was called normal school or whatever. And so she taught in Canada. She taught in a 1-room schoolhouse outside, near Queens, actually.
Mhm.
And she lived with her aunt. And she dated many different men and finally decided that she wanted to look elsewhere. Went to live with an uncle in Brooklyn. Met another man, not my father, got engaged. And that they broke up because her father died. My grandfather, the rabbi, died, and my mother had to send money home to help the family.
Mhm.
And he didn't want to take that on because he was just starting a law practice. So they broke up, and she married my father on the rebound. She
And
met
where
my
did they
father
meet?
in Brooklyn.
They met in Brooklyn.
They met in Brooklyn,
Yeah.
yes.
And what did your father do for a living?
My father was a linotype operator,
Mm-hmm.
and it was a terrific profession in those days.
Mm.
He made very good money. They had a wonderful union. The linotype union was one of the big 6. It was, and so he did well. But she got a teaching job, and she taught school in Brooklyn.
Mm-hmm.
And she had, to get her license, she had to learn American history because Canadian history is different.
Yeah.
They think they won the War of 1812
Mhm.
because they captured Washington.
Yeah.
Anyway, she put my father into the business. They bought a few machines, and he had his own business.
His own linotype?
His own linotype shop where they took her brother. Her brother came from Canada, and he apprenticed and learned the trade. And then my father started printing the Daily Telegraph, which was a racing paper, and he got involved with racing.
Horse racing?
Horse racing, and gambled away the whole business. By the mid-40s, there was nothing left.
Did he own horses, or he just went to
No,
the
he
track
just
with-
gambled. He gambled. It wasn't just on the races. It wasn't just going to the track. He gambled
Yeah.
on everything. We had bookies chasing him. It was quite an
And-
upbringing for me.
Where did you go to school?
I went to PS 206 in Brooklyn. I walked to school. And we came home for lunch. I had a hot lunch. My mother stayed home. She went back to teaching when my sister was born, the older sister. And when I was born, they transferred her to a tough neighborhood. In those days, a tough neighborhood was Italian. And after 1 day or 2 days, she quit. That was the end. She never taught again. So I was raised by my mother. My sister was raised by maids, by Swedish maids, very strict Swedish maids.
Oh, they did have maids in those days.
Oh, yes.
And when did you move to Stanford and why?
Okay, I didn't finish with my education.
Oh,
Well, let
okay.
me just finish. I went to James Madison High School, met Donald Blick, went to Brooklyn College. In my junior year, I married Donald.
What year was that?
1954, I married Donald. Graduated from Brooklyn, taught in, got my master's in Brooklyn for 3 years after 55, so it was 58, 59 actually, I finished 58, and got pregnant with Robert, and came to Stanford in June of 1959 with a 3-month-old baby. Moved into Fairlawn Apartments. It was very hard to get an apartment, but Donald got a job in Norwalk with Norwalk Stationers, and he had pulled with Hartman, the owner of Fairlawn. And we just jumped the list. We got an apartment at 49 Standish Road, and I lived there for 9 years. And at that time, I met Barbara and Arnold Yellen. Should I do all these things?
Yeah.
Met Barbara and Arnold in 1959, first people I met.
They were living in Fairlawn.
They were in Fairlawn across the road. They had, Craig was the same age as Robert. And through them, I met the Baums. Through the Baums, I met you and Elaine and a lot of my friends. And I also got very involved with Women's American Org.
What is ORT? What is the
ORT
acronym?
stands for the Organization for Rehabilitation Through Training. And it's an organization, a worldwide organization, that helps people to help themselves. In
Is
other
this a
words, it
Jewish-
gives them, it's a Jewish organization. It teaches trades. In other words, instead of just giving handouts, it teaches people to do their own work and get jobs. And it's still doing it. ORT is still, I'm still a member of ORT, and they're still doing it all over they do it all over the world. And it's not just for Jews, they help non-Jews too. But originally it was a Jewish organization.
So what was your participation in the organization?
Oh, I became very active. I started out as membership chairman, and that's how I met most of my friends. New people came into town, I would contact them and get friendly. I wanted to make friends. And that's how I met the Spats and the Finelands and another whole group that became my friends.
Is that organization still exist in Stanford?
I believe so. I don't know. What happened was we sort of went out, we had a lot of problems after I went back to work or whatever. It was, it sort of died out a little. And then they opened a new chapter. We were the Twin Ridge chapter. There was an older chapter called the Stanford chapter. And there were some of the real older Jewish women in it. And we were the young Jewish women. But of course, we had Frida and Florence Bloomfield. They were the young Jewish women.
They were in your group.
They were in our group. They didn't
them.
want to be in the other group. And the other group was Molly Chandler
Yeah.
and some other women. I don't remember all the names, but apparently you had to get along with, when I became president, I had to get along with Molly Chandler, who was in the other group. And it was everybody said this. She's the most difficult, and I got along with her. She was.
So what did you actually fundraise, or what did the organization?
Yeah, we did fundraising.
And what was the method of fundraising?
We had socials. We had raffles. We had a thrift shop, like the Hadassah thrift shop. We had a thrift shop.
Where was that located?
It was downtown before, I think it was, I don't know if it was after or before redevelopment, but it was. You remember Ann Teitelbaum?
Yes.
Working with her in the store was really fun. I mean, she was so funny. She knew how to sell everything. She could sell anything to anybody. It was just fun, just being there.
That, as I recall, was on Main Street near where Bobby Valentine is now.
Yes, it was.
Yeah.
Yes, it was. You're right.
So now you have one child,
Yes,
you're active in Hort,
right.
and you have a teaching degree.
I have a teaching degree, but I can't teach because I'm a mother with a young child. So I taught on Sundays. I taught Sunday school at Temple Shalom in Norwalk on Richards Avenue. I did that for a couple of years. And then, I had Michael.
And what were you teaching?
Jewish history.
Okay.
That's what got me so interested in the whole thing, the historical society and everything. I had to be one step ahead of the kids.
Yeah.
So I had to read up on Jewish history.
Where did you do this?
At Temple Shalom in
Greenwich?
Norwalk,
Uh-huh.
on Richards Avenue in Norwalk. And then Michael was born, and Rabbi Ann Krantz did the circumcision at the apartment. And I lived in the apartment with two children, a two-bedroom apartment, one bed. But I lived there for 9 years, and when Michael was in first grade, and before that, before we moved, I subbed for 2 years, but
Locally?
Locally, I subbed in almost all of the schools in Stamford, at elementary schools.
And here you were a teacher in New York public school.
In New York, I had tenure. I had been a teacher, and I had a master's degree. But I didn't want to. I couldn't work full time. I had two little children.
Yeah, but this was prior to coming to Stanford?
Not what?
When you worked in New York City?
Yes, I taught for 3.5 years in New York.
And what grade and what was your subject matter?
In New York,
Yeah.
it was 5th grade, and it was elementary.
Mhm.
And when I came here, I subbed in all the grades. And then when Michael was in first grade, I went back to teaching. At that point, I was buying a house too. I bought the house on Three Lakes Drive. I should say we, Donald and I bought it, but it turned out that I bought it. Not financially, it was a surprise. It was a surprise that, I didn't expect to get it. They were all filled up, and my friends, the Spats, and, the Allswangers, I didn't know they were living there.
Yeah.
They were going to be living there, but the Spats were living there, and they were all filled up. And I called up to find out where they were building, and she said, "You're a friend of the Spats?" She said, "Somebody just backed out of a house. Come on down. There's a list, but you could jump the list." So I walked down there. They showed me the house next door that was finished, and she said, I said, "I don't know if I could pay for a mortgage." She said, "What is your husband making?" I told her. She said, "I can get you a mortgage. Give me a check for $100. The house is yours."
What was the total price of the house?
$35,500.
Okay.
What year was that?
That was 1960. Well, yes, it was the beginning of 1968, but we moved in. The house was ready in June of '68, exactly 9 years after I moved to town. So I didn't have to sign the new lease and feel one.
Now, your next teaching position was...
Then I started,
Yeah.
the only teaching position that I had was at Northeast School. But at that time, there was an annex. The whole third grade was in Martha Hoyt School, which is the Stanford Historical Society now. And so I taught at Martha Hoyt for a few years until they closed it and we moved back into Northeast School. And I taught at Northeast my whole teaching career here for 26 years. I taught there.
And what grades did you teach?
3rd and 4th. And I loved it.
Getting back to your family, I remember your mom was at the Jewish home. When did she come to Stanford?
My mother, you mean when did she come to Fairfield?
Well, was she living in Stanford before?
No, she was living in Messina, New York,
Yeah.
which is right across from Cornwall.
Mhm.
She was living with my aunt and uncle. My father had died in 1956. And they took her this is what I mean about my mother's wonderful family. They just said, "You're coming to live with us."
Mhm.
She was legally blind. That's why she never went back to teaching. And so she went up to Messina to live with my aunt and uncle. She lived with them for a long time. And from 56 to 70. I think in 79 she came to the Jewish home.
And how many years was she there?
She was at the Jewish home for 14 years.
Mm.
She died in 93. She was queen of the home.
Yeah.
She wrote her memoirs there. It was a wonderful experience.
Mhm.
They took them everywhere. She loved it there, and they were very good to her. And she started dictating her memoirs to me. And she had a group. There was a group there that did creative writing, and they would read it out loud, whatever I had written down.
Yeah.
In fact, my sister, after my mother died, my sister took all the writing, put it on the computer, and made books for all of my cousins and aunts and uncles. The ones that were left had those books
Mhm.
with my mother's writing and all the things about the home in Lithuania and the home in Canada and the whole life. And when I retired in 1994, I wrote my memoir. And my kids will have it. It's on the computer and a lot of it's printed out.
Mhm.
So,
Getting back to your family, spouse, partners, you were married to Donnie in 54,
yes, and we were divorced in 79.
and he's the father of
He's
Robert.
the father of Robert and Michael, and he remained my friend. And
He was a fun guy. So.
He was a lot of fun, and he just didn't want to live in suburbia anymore, and he didn't want to have a mother. I became the mother in the relationship. He never grew up. He was like Peter Pan. He never grew up, and he just didn't want the life anymore, and we parted with tears, both of us.
I
We
remember
remained friends.
when Donnie was written up in the paper when he was working, was for
Yeah.
Spinnerin.
Yes.
You want to talk about
He
that?
was knitting.
He was a big, big person, not a.
6'2",
Yeah.
big guy, and he was actually, yeah, he was learning to knit. He was working for Spinnerin Yarn Company, and it was just before we moved into the house. It was 1968, and they did a whole piece on him, the New York Times, of him because he was learning how to knit and he was commuting. So he was doing it on the train. So they did a whole piece on him knitting. Anyway, but we parted amicably, and he died last year.
Mhm.
And I was very sad.
And you married High.
I married High I met High in 1982, and we were married in 1983, August 7th, 1983. We were married for 25 years. And he died 2 years ago. His children, I'm still very close to his children. I mean, they were teenagers when we married. And I'm very friendly with his ex-wife and her husband. We have very good relations and it's very good for the kids. It's a little difficult for the grandchildren at the beginning to understand who's who in the family, but it works out fine. They have extra grandparents, and it's very good for them.
Did you have a mentor that you can look back and say, well, this person really had a big effect on my life? Either a school teacher or somebody in college or a friend?
I don't know, I think all of my friends and family have had, have affected me in ways. I mean, I learned a lot through my friends and through my relationships with people. I've learned, like I learned all about mustache cups from you. I really, I think that people are the best teachers. Everybody's got different interests, and you pick up. I mean, High got me. Well, I was going out with a man who was musician and a music teacher before I met Hi. But that with Donnie, I had that's mine. Can you stop it? We had to. I had to stop because I got a phone call. I'm very sorry.
All right, let's continue. We were talking about your relationship with your stepchildren.
I also want to mention that I traveled a lot, and with Donnie, we had traveled to to Europe. We had traveled to Israel. We had traveled to Asia. And when I met Hi, the first thing he asked me was, did I like to travel? And I said yes. And every year we traveled in the summer, and we traveled, because I taught, we traveled at Christmas. He couldn't go away in February because he was an accountant, and it was tax season. But we did many trips.
Did you do mostly land trips or cruises?
We did when we were young. We did a lot of land trips, and then once I got the cruising, he had cruised with his family, and once we went on after my first cruise, that was it. We've done. I've done 25 cruises, more, maybe 26 now. But I love it. It's the easiest way to travel.
Yeah. Getting back to your married life and your children and your job, did you experience any anti-Semitism in teaching or in any of the, like when you lived in Canada or when you moved down here?
I didn't live in Canada.
Mother did.
My mother lived in
Yeah.
Canada. No, I lived in Brooklyn. And Brooklyn is a ghetto.
Yeah.
Everybody's Jewish, and if they're not Jewish, they're Italian. And I didn't have a Jew. You had mentioned about a Jewish education. My parents felt that, especially in the 30s and early 40s before the Holocaust, they, even though my mother was a rabbi's daughter, she felt that girls didn't need to learn Hebrew. They didn't have bat mitzvahs in those days. And so I never went to Hebrew school, which I'm sorry about. I did go to Sunday school a few years, and I learned about the holidays. I knew a lot of, I got a lot of Jewish education those few semesters in Sunday school. When I came to Stanford, was the first time I ever experienced it. One of my neighbors made a remark about somebody honking a horn, called him a New York maxi. And actually, when I was teaching at Martha Hoyt School, one of the teachers from Washington State came out with a remark about chewing somebody down. And I told her that that was a very offensive term and she should be careful because a lot of the students were Jewish and the teachers were Jewish and the parents were Jewish. Then she came out with another one about a year later. She got into a dispute with her landlady who tried to Jew her out of something, meaning cheat. And she took a look at me, she turned white, and I looked at her and I really gave it to her. I said, it's one thing to talk about bargaining, it's another thing to talk about cheating. But that's the way she was brought up, and this is the only thing. And my mother in Canada, she didn't experience it growing up in a small town in Canada. She experienced it at a teachers' convention. Somebody made a remark.
In the community that she lived in Canada, were there many Jewish families, or was?
Well, it was enough for shul. There was enough for a rabbi to pay for a rabbi. There's none now. I understand there's no rabbi in Cornwall anymore.
How about your two boys? Were they bar mitzvah?
Yes, we joined because Donnie liked he just wanted to have a regular a real Jewish education. He was fluent in Hebrew. He had taken it in high school.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Where did he go to high school?
He went to Madison.
And they taught Hebrew?
Yes.
Oh,
yes, as a language.
Mm-hmm.
And he took Hebrew, and of course he learned the Sephardic Hebrew. In those days, nobody was speaking it. We're talking about the beginning of Israel, but we all spoke Ashkenazi. I mean, our family spoke Ashkenazi Hebrew. But so we joined Agudas Shalom, and the kids were both bar mitzvahed from there. And after the divorce, that was the end. I didn't need to go anymore. When I married Hy, he was Reform, and so we joined Sinai. And he got on the board of Sinai, and got into it with Rabbi Pierce over the way they were keeping the books or whatever. And so that he was sort of persona non grata. So we left Sinai, and when his mother died, he needed a place to go say prayers. So we joined Bethel, the conservative, because that was the closest temple we had. But actually, Bethel wasn't the answer for us. His granddaughters are being raised Jewish, but their mother is not Jewish. So they wouldn't be considered Jewish, in conservative or Orthodox, even though they're being raised Jewish.
Yeah.
And we wouldn't have even been considered married. Even though we were married by a rabbi, we did not have, I did not have a get, and he did not give a get to his wife, his ex-wife, because she married a Christian, and besides they were Reformed. So that was our, I've been members of 3 temples in this town. I met a lot of people between the teaching and my friends and the clubs. I'm a life member of Hadassah. I did belong to National Council of Jewish Women for a while.
I have a question now about, you've been in Stanford over 50 years. You've seen a lot of changes. Your gut feeling, do you think it's better in the direction we're in, have been going in, becoming downtown, with all the apartments and the no more mom and pop stores? Was it better in the 50s and 60s and 70s, or do you think it's better now?
I don't think it's really better. I mean, it was nice in those days to go into Martin's department store, and C.O. Martin, was it?
C.O. Miller.
C.O. Miller, right. C.O. Miller's department store. I remember shopping there. I love Stanford now. I go downtown, I see all these young people on Bedford Street, in the restaurants when I drive past, and I think it's lovely. I mean, the parking, of course, the parking is a problem. But I love Stanford. Even though I go to Florida for 4 months, there's no way that I would ever stay any longer. I really love it. I take classes here. We have this learning in retirement. We have the senior center, where I also listen to speakers and belong to a current events group every Wednesday. No, Stanford is definitely my home. There is no way that I would want it to change.
Well, I'm happy to hear that, because being a native, it's like in a worm and a horseradish. You don't know any better. But
no.
I think that it's great that we had a forward-looking mayor. Otherwise, we could have ended up being another Bridgeport, because as a young child growing up, Stanford was an industrial blue-collar town, and most of the people were working in industry in the South End. Allentown was probably the largest employer, and you have Schick Electric Razors and Excelsior Hardware, and many small manufacturing companies, which we will never ever see again.
But we have a lot of white collar workers now, and hopefully we're not going to lose them with UBF.
Yeah, hopefully.
My stepson works at Royal Bank of Scotland, which is a big employer here in town, and I hope they stay. There were times when I used to be afraid to go downtown. I don't feel that way again. I feel feel safer here. I used to be afraid there was somebody attacked it when Bloomingdale's was open.
Yeah.
But now, I would assume that parking lot, they're all college students. See, the college is down there now. So, there's a lot of things I don't like. I certainly don't like Trump Park. I just think some of the, the Target is sort of a funny, silly store with
Yeah.
the parking and everything. But I love Stanford.
Great, glad to hear that. Well, Eleanor, it's been a real pleasure speaking with you for the past hour. And in a very short while, you'll get a DVD copy of this interview, which you can share with your family.
Thank you.
So thanks again.
Just
Thank
one,
you.
one last
Pleasure.
thing. Is there anything you wanted to say, talk about that we didn't ask you about?
I'll think about it later. I'm sure I'll think about
You
it
wanted
later.
to hold up that picture of the
Oh,
art.
the art. What did I
think
do with
you Put
it?
it down on the side.
Oh, yeah. This is the.
You want to
This
Okay,
is
yeah.
from.
Just hold it up and I'll try to get to it.
Can you get the fact that the date on it? Too?
No, that's a little too small. You want to point out who those people are? Right.
The date is September 15th, 1967.
Okay.
And this is me.
Okay.
Okay, this is Stephanie Fineland, who's still a very dear friend. And this is Barbara Spack, who's a lovely, and also a dear friend who's living at the Jewish home now. This lady has moved out of town. Evelyn Senk passed away a long number of years ago, many years ago. And I really lost touch with her, with I forgot her name, Gordon. This lady here, I have no idea if she's still alive. But this was our the chairmanships of Twin Ridge Org in 1967.
Okay, well, thank you so much.
Oh, no.